Welcome back, YouTube. This is Tristan Blaze again with this is kind of a deck tech. This is more what I would like to say a before I revamp this deck and make it a little bit more competitive. So basically several years ago, a deck called Dreadstill came out in the format using Dreadnought and Stifle to give you a 12/12 trampler on turn 1. Or I'm sorry, turn 2. At the time, I decided to build the deck. So this is what I was running for a while because, well, I really didn't have the money. What I'm going to be doing is retooling the deck to make it a lot more competitive. As you see, there are some cards in here that really don't have a place in Dreadstill anymore, so I wanted to show you a little bit of what I ran before. And once I retool the deck and develop the sideboard, I can show you everything about the deck and why it's more competitive at this point in time. So to start out, we have our creature base here, which is Phyrexian Dreadnought, 12/12 trampler for 1 mana. Comes into play, you just, use a stifle effect and get rid of the comes into play ability. That's your primary win condition. For the late game, we have Grim Lavamancer. Originally, I had to tinker around with this a bit because I started out with 4 and then went down to 2 and then back up to 3. And I kind of think 2 is a good number. 3, it allows you to draw more of them, but I want this for late game. Like late game, counter war has been raging on possibly. Creature kill has been taken care of. Countertop in place, what have you. That's why I only go for 2. And then here we go. We got half of the countertop combo, basically. We got Sensei's Divining Top. I used to have a lot of these, but I don't know. It was just me because I kept pulling these, just drafting Kamigawa back then. It was just like I'd pull like one every draft for some reason. It's real good. It's basically top 3. And we get to stack our draws relatively easily, filter through in combination with fetch lands. Real good to just get rid of crap we don't need at the time. And then the Singleton Engineered Explosives. I'm probably going to go maybe up to 2 Engineered Explosives in the main deck. Simply because having 2 ways, having like 2 board wipes really works, especially with like True Name Nemesis now in Legacy. So that would really help going up with that. And this is a 3-color build, mind you. So I built it initially as blue-white, but with True Name Nemesis, I went ahead and added a 3rd color, 1 to combat True Name Nemesis, and 2 for Grim Lavamancer. Now we got our mana base. We got 5 islands. Now these are actually alpha, not betas. I had I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, somebody gave me like an alpha starter pack as a gift. And I had obviously you get a bunch of lands. I did not get any duels. I did not get any Power 9. Do not ask. The cards I remember getting alpha was Sarah Angel, Lightning Bolt, Time Vault, and Sinkhole. They've all been traded, so don't ask if I have them. Got 3 Wastelands, originally 4, but I dropped it down to 3 to make way for the 3rd color. And no, you're not seeing an optical illusion. I'm broke as hell, but yes, I traded 4 Vindicates several years ago for a foil Wasteland and another non-foil Wasteland. I was using Vindicates a lot. I looked at it and I said, well, this guy wants Vindicates, he's willing to trade 2 Wastelands, and I had to pull the trigger and get rid of my Vindicates. I really haven't looked back since then on Vindicate. And from my days of playing Onslaught block, we got 3 Flooded Strands, 3 Polluted Deltas. You know, color fixing, shuffle effects with Brainstorm, Sensei's Divining Top work great with this deck. And we got 3 Mishra's Factories, Creature Beats. I've actually won games with this. I've actually won games just animating Mishra's Factories under a standstill. And it's a real pain for some decks to deal with when they are rather multicolored but really can't go with stuff like Wastelands or Ghost Quarters. So the factories can really just beat them down if you can land like a turn 2 standstill. And then our duels. Originally, once again, deck was blue-white. I had 1 Tundra. So whenever I would have to say Engineer Explosive for 2, I'd have Effect Land ready to search out that Tundra. Later I added Plateaus. Obviously the Plateaus for Grim Lavamancer, of course. I'm retooling the deck. I'm actually going to be making them Volcanic Islands. Simply because I need the blue. I need the blue for stuff like Spell Snare and Daze for the island ability to use it. So, I mean, you know, Plateaus, I think it's like $35, maybe $40 right now online. It's a cheap alternative, if you want to say that, to Volcanic Island. But if you're going to actually play in a tournament, you need the Flooded Strand to search it. You can't use the Polluted Delta, obviously. But, you know, I'm getting some money, and, you know, tax time's coming up. I already got a list of what I'm getting. You know, financially, my family's in a better situation than we were a few years ago when I just, like, threw this deck together with, you know, literally I just threw this together with what I had available. The only card I actually had to buy was, I think, like, 2 Stifles and a Tundra, and that was it. Everything else I owned. Now our counter spells. Force of Will. 4 copies Force of Will. These are running, I think these are almost like $80 now. I remember the last time I purchased a Force of Will, it was $15. I also remember when I purchased Lion's Eye Diamonds for $5 at my local card shop, but those were the days, obviously. Trinket Mage. I like this card. I mean, I like Trinket Mage a lot because I play Legacy. I'm Legacy only, and there's literally just so many cards, well, so many artifacts that are just 1 mana that Trinket Mage can just pull. You know, Grave Hate with Relic, or Tormod's Crypt, you know, Engineered Explosive, Sensei's Divining Top. You know, I mean, just so many things you can pull. And obviously you pull Phyrexian Dreadnought right there. 1 mana, there you go. Standstill. Standstill is real. Standstill is a real pain in the ass to play against. Because basically, if you let your opponent drop a standstill and they have a very good position on the field, it's pretty much game over. So, I mean, if you're playing against a deck that runs standstill, try to keep it off the board. Just try to keep it from, you know, just coming out. You know, Thoughtseize it. Inquisition of, you know, IOK, I have no idea how to pronounce that last word in the card. You know, just try to keep it from getting on the field. If it gets on the field, pop it as soon as you can. Because the last thing you want is, you know, you don't want a standstill to just sit there for 4 or 5 turns. Because all my deck is going to do, all Dreadstill is going to do is it's going to keep drawing cards. And if it's got a Sensei's Divining Top out there, it's just going to, okay, end of your turn, top. Oh, you know, the 3rd card is a Force of Will. I'm going to put that on top. And it's going to keep drawing into more counters. Or drawing into Brainstorms. And the sooner you pop Standstill, the better it is. And we got Daze. Free counter magic. Free counter magic with Daze. Free counter magic with Force of Will. It's Legacy. What do you expect me to run? 4 copies right off the bat. Here we go, counterbalance. Some people, I don't know what it is, but some people don't know how to stack the triggers of counterbalance and Sensei's Divining Top. When you have them both in play, your opponent plays a spell. You put counterbalance's triggered ability on the stack. You then take Sensei's Divining Top, you pay the 1, put that ability on top of the stack. Look at the top 3 of your library. Rearrange them in any order. If they play a 2-mana cost spell and there's a 2-mana cost spell on top, boom, flip it, it's countered. If not, hopefully you have some counter magic in your hand. Hopefully you have like a spell snare. Now we got 2 trick binds and 4 stifles. These are my stifle effects. They kill fetch lands, they can stop, to some degree they can stop storm. Obviously some storm decks can just, go off and, you'll trick bind them, they'll say, oh, okay, whatever, and then they'll just, cast another copy of whatever they were going to play. Same with Stifle. I remember back when I was running Stifle against, this was back when Solidarity was, one of the 3 big decks in Legacy. I stifled Brain Freeze. The guy's like, okay. Remans his own Brain Freeze, draws a card, plays Brain Freeze again. And I was sitting there, I was like, crap, I didn't think of that. But, Stifle and Trick Bind work really good. Obviously, killing fetch lands, activated, triggered abilities, of course, like Storm. But main reason they're here is Dreadnought. Comes into play, you put Dreadnought's triggered ability on the stack. You play either Stifle or Trick Bind, depending on what's in your hand. Stifle, you can do this combo on turn 2. Trick Bind is turn 3. Now the good thing about Stifle is it's faster, single mana, very mana light basically. Trick Bind's got the split second ability. Prior to Abrupt Decay entering Legacy, this was my go-to as my Stifle 5 and 6. A lot of times, some players would see you drop a Dreadnought, they'll say, okay, I'm going to wait till he casts Stifle, counter the Stifle, and get a 2-for-1 trade, because he's going to have to sack the Dreadnought. You show up with Trick Bind, boom. They can't counter the Trick Bind because of split second. Now, obviously, they could respond with Morph, but what creature in I don't know what creature in Legacy has Morph. I really don't. Maybe there is. I don't know. Don't care. Right now, because Abrupt Decay is in the format, you want to switch these out for Vision Charm. So when I retool the deck, these are going to become Vision Charms. And then I'm going to have 2 more on the board. Well, maybe at least 1 or 2 on the board, obviously. At least 1 on the board. And these are definitely going to help combat Abrupt Decay, because you can A, cast your Dreadnought, go ahead and Vision Charm it to phase it out, so the trigger now has to clear the stack. The trigger clears the stack, and then your Dreadnought phases back in. Phasing is not coming into play. It's still in play, but in a different game zone. So for a lot of people think it triggers, comes into play. It does not trigger comes into play effects. Phasing does not do that. If a card specifically says when this phases in, phases out, then that's different, because that's on the card. And one of the most, if not the most intensive cards, skill-wise, which I sometimes get right, is Brainstorm. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a great brainstormer. It's real simple. You do this right, this is an Ancestral Recall in Legacy. I mean, if you get this right, Ancestral Recall, draw Force, Daze, Spell Snare, throwback, 2 basic lands, and then crack a fetch land, shuffle all that crap away. Now I remember playing, it was Ice Age and Mirage, and I remember my basic game plan. I had Impulse and I had Brainstorm, where I would Impulse to to find my brainstorms, brainstorm my basic lands back into my deck, and then Thawing Glacier the basic lands back out. It was like ridiculous. It was like ridiculously complicated, but what do you expect? This was Ice Age and, you know, Mirage block. You know, we weren't... This is Ice Age and Mirage. This isn't like it is now where we have, you know, like 50 different sets of Magic to just rock on with. You know, it was standard. We had like, what, 3 sets, I think? Well, you know, we had 2 blocks, basically. So, I mean, come on. You know, our choices were pretty freaking limited. Although we had Force of Will and Necropotence and some really crazy stuff for standard back then. But that was the day. It was back in the day. Which a 32-year-old Magic player like me likes to reminisce about, making people cry with my Stasis deck. And then here we go. Final 3 counters, Spell Snare. Yeah, you can go Spell Snare, you can go Spell Pierce. I prefer Spell Snare. Spell Pierce does have its place as a counter spell if you have heavy combo matchups. If your metagame is like very, very heavily combo, yeah, Spell Pierce is great because, you know, it forces them pay 2 or it's countered. And then if you got a Daze, it's pay 3, technically, if it's countered, if they gotta go that route. But Spell Snare is more of a catch-all because there's so many 2-mana cost spells in Legacy. I mean, look at my Goblin Charbelcher deck. You got, you know, 8 of my red rituals are 2 mana right off the bat, and I normally go through about 1 or 2 of those when I'm comboing off. So you Spell Snare one of them, I'm dead in the water technically. You got Tarmogoyf, which, you know, it's kind of still out there. You got Dark Competent. Okay, you got Thalia. You got Stoneforge Mystic. I mean, you got Umezawa's Jit. That's a big one. I mean, God, there's so many 2-mana cost spells. I really just, like legitimately, I really just can't name all the really good 2-mana cost spells that have just horribly messed me up. Oh, and one more thing. When somebody, if somebody's playing Chalice of the Void, and they play Chalice of the Void, and they say, I'm going to play Chalice at 1 to kill Sensei's Top, Lava Mancer, Dreadnought, Brainstorm Stifle, you know, all that hunky-dory stuff, they're paying 1 mana per X on the card. There's 2 X's on the card. Here's how it works. 1, you're going to play Chalice of the Void at 1. You need to spend 2 mana. So you can Spell Snare Chalice of the Void if they're playing it for just 1 charge counter. Then it comes into play with a charge counter on it. But it comes into play with that charge counter, the converted mana cost is still 0. So you can play Engineered Explosives for 0 and then just blow it up. A little tip like that can go a long way. Now, obviously, what I'm doing is I'm going to be retooling it. I'm going to add another Tundra, and I'm going to take out the 2 Plateaus and put in 2 Volcanic Islands. What am I taking out for the extra Tundra? Well, that's going to be a basic island. I love my beta, or not my beta, I love my Alpha Islands. They're the only 5 Alpha Islands I have, but one of them's got to go for a duel. And I'll be taking out Trick Binds for Vision Charms, and you know my board is going to be, I'm leaning towards Surgical Extraction, another Engineered Explosives in the board, at least that in the board. Possibly taking something out for the second copy in the main. I'm not 100%. At least 1 or 2 Vision Charms in the sideboard. 4th Spell Snare in the sideboard. Dismember seems like a good card as well. So once again, this is the very first control deck I've posted. I will be posting more in the future. So if you like it, you know, subscribe, comment, and complain about the plateaus in a blue control deck.